So, what a rainy afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all safe and none of you won't encounter any unstable connection. And, we are beyond grateful because despite of the heavy rains, you are all here with us. And we're so sorry if we um, take your time here kahit holiday ngayon. But we will try to have this synchronous meeting to be active, That's why we provided a short energizer for all of us. And, without further ado, let's start with our energizer. Yes. So our topic will be modern fantasy, but we should do the energizer first para medyo ma-awaken yung consciousness natin when we listen to our topic. Okay, let's move on. So we will be playing or we will be having guess the picture. As you all know, guess the picture is so pretty basic when it comes to Energizer. That's why the mechanics are pretty much easy as well. But there's a twist. The twist here is if you want to participate, you must first answer the question. So you only have the chance to participate if you answer the question correctly. The first individuals who will type the answer to me correctly, you will have the chance to answer or guess the picture. So everyone, please change your comment settings. It should all be directed to me only so that no one else could see your answer. You will be given chances, so don't worry about it. You will garner points naman as we go through the Energizer. I'll just give you 15 seconds to change your setting, then we'll start. Thank you. Okay, 15 seconds is done. So, I guess we are all excited naman. Are you guys excited ba for this game? This is quite easy talaga, as in. So, can you please type hello in the comment section so that um I can see you visibly kung tama ba talaga yung naka-input. There. Thank you, Miss Tyson, Jana, Nicole. Okay, Evangeline. Okay, thank you. So we will start our game. So in this per question, you can garner 2 points. Okay, one for the question and one for guess the picture. Okay, let's start. When I count to three, wait. I'll ask you first a question. Then after that, you will have the chance to participate. Okay? So be ready, guys. I will ask the first question. Okay? Okay, so for number one question, okay? This type of genre involves things that are imaginable or maybe impossible or far from reality. What is that genre? One, two, three, go. Okay, we have three winners for the first question, which are Kaizen May Cardino, Jana Ramos, and Nicole Flor. So you three have the chance to participate for Guess the Picture. Guess the Picture is also you can you can also just type it. No need to unmute your mic. Okay? Thank you so much. Okay, since you are the contestants for the number one question, this is the Guess the Picture. You only have 15 seconds to guess the picture, guys. Go, guys. You can do it. Hmm? Maybe. You should try to guess the movie or the literature of what you call the ants. Try to guess lang. I'll give you another 15 seconds. The Ant-Man. Okay? Okay. So I think none of you got the correct answer. No, yes, it is an ant, but it is not the Ant-Man or the ant and the grasshopper. So I'll give you another chance. Okay? Here, I'll give you 15 seconds to guess again. Okay, none of you got the correct answer again. So I'll give you a last chance. What is the movie of this picture? Okay. I see one correct answer. Okay. So this Kaizen is correct. Okay, there are two. Kaizen, Cardino, and there you go. I'm very sorry, that the meeting or the recording meeting stopped, but we will continue now. Number two question. Be ready. Give me a story where there is a talking animal. For number two question, give me a story where there is a talking animal. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Okay. We have here from Kaizen, the Lion King. Number two is from Ate Davi, three Little Pigs. That is correct. And for Nicole Chorus, the Three Little Pigs too. Okay. I'm sorry, Jana. No, bawi tayo ulit sa next round. Okay. Thank you. So you three are the new contestants for the number two question. The number two, guess the picture. Okay. Be ready. I'll give you 15 seconds to answer this. Go. Go, guys. Okay, I see that none of you got the correct answer, so I'll give you another chance. 15 seconds. Go, guys. Try to guess. What literature or movie is this? Okay, I think you have no idea what this is, but I'll give you another chance, okay? Here. What movie or literature is this? Okay, I think Ate Davy got the correct answer, but it is spelled wrong. But still, I'll consider it na. Okay, I'll also consider Nicole Clark. Since I already answered the question, cut na tayo doon. This is a literature about Shrek. Yes. Actually, when I first saw this, I don't have any idea either. So this is Shrek. So later on, we will use that as an example. Maybe by my other um reporters. Okay, next question for number 3. What fantasy have you read or watched? What fantasy have you read or watched? 1, 2, 3, go. I'll wait your answers in the comment section. Okay. Last person. I'll give another 5 seconds for the last person. We have here Kaizen Cardino and Ate Davi. And lastly, Nicole Flores. Wow, very participative. Sila Kaizen. Okay. So this is your third guess the picture. Okay, I'll give you 15 seconds again. Go. The contestants here are Nicole Flores, Ate Davi, and Kaizen McCarthy. Okay, someone is correct. Okay. Congrats, Miss Nicole Flores, because the Lord of the Rings is correct. Sorry, Ate Davi and Kaizen. We'll have another chance later on, okay? That is correct, Nicole Flores. Thumbs up for you. Okay, for the fourth question, be ready. Who is considered as the father of modern English literature? Who is considered as the father of modern English literature? Please type your answer in the comment section below. I'll give you 10 seconds to answer this. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's see who got the first 3 who got the correct answer. Okay, I'll give the last chance to the third person. I'll give you another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Yes. Okay, I have here Nicole Flores and Jana. Yes, Jana. They answered William Shakespeare. Yes, that is correct. William Shakespeare. Okay. You two have the chance to guess the picture for the fourth round. Okay, I'll give you 15 seconds. I wait. Okay. Go. Ay! Okay, ako na lang magbibilang. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. Ha ha ha. Okay, both of you got the correct answer. The Hobbit. Um, Miss Nicole and Miss Jana is correct. Ate Davy, you are incorrect earlier for the question, so you don't have the chance to participate. I'm very sorry, Ate. But your answer is also correct, The Hobbit. Okay. Again, for the last question. Okay. Someone is calling just for a moment. Okay, for the fifth question, give me one dwarf name in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Give me one dwarf name in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Okay. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, for the last person. Last person. Okay, let me see. Okay, I'll give you another chance, Ate Davy. All of what you gave me is incorrect. Another guess pa, Ate Davy. Okay, but Miss Kaizen again and Miss Jana again is correct. Happy, sleepy, and ayon, Ate Davy correct, sneezy. Okay, you have the chance to guess the picture. Be ready. So the answer is the Hobbit. Guess the picture, 15 seconds. Okay, I don't see any answers, so I'll guess I'll give you another chance. Okay, someone commented the right answer. I'm sorry, Ate Davy, again. Unfortunately, you are incorrect. So for this round, the winner is Miss Kaizen, May Cordino, and Jana Ramos. The answer is the cat in the hat. Okay, for the last question, give I okay for the last question. Mm, give me a story that you like once you were a kid. Give me a story that the one. Give me a story once you liked when you were a kid. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Okay. I see Miss Davy, Jana. So I'll give another. Okay, Cinderella by Nicole Flores. So Ate Davy commented Percy Jackson, Jana, Alice in the Wonderland. Wow. And Nicole for Cinderella. Okay, you have 15 seconds to guess this picture. This is quite easy. I think a lot of you will guess it, especially the one who answered this. No one? No one? Okay. Okay, I'll give you another chance. This is quite easy, as in. Here, and another 15 seconds for all of you. For the three of you, I mean. None? Okay, last. Okay, I see some correct answer now. Okay, so the answer here is Alice in the Wonderland. So Jana, um, of course it's correct because she loved this movie, and Alice in the Wonderland um is also answered by Miss Nicole Flores. Okay, thank you so much for participating. That is our last round. It took us about 15 minutes or 30 minutes, I guess. So I'll be quick now for our introduction. Okay, let's start with our topic, which is the modern fantasy. So I would like to introduce myself, of course. I am Malia Bianca Di Catalan, and I am your first discussant for this morning. So um, thank you for participating. Rest assured that all of your scores are recorded will be submitted to Sir Dizon. So let's start, no? So these are the discussants for today, which are Ivy May Lopez, Alia Catalan, me, Evangeline Cedo, and of course Nizel Pamplona. So before I discuss or introduce the whole topic, we should have an aim, the learning outcomes. So students should be able to define the meaning of modern fantasy, to discuss the evaluation and selection of modern fantasy, and to identify the different types of modern fantasy. Okay, next. But before I give the microphone to Miss Ivy Lopez for the definition of modern fantasy, I would like to share a little reading prompt that I think would stimulate our minds in discussing our topic. So there are parents, there are parents, people older than us that are so concerned about, of course, the welfare of their kids or their young ones or their sisters, siblings, and such. And they often worry about fantasy fiction. It may confuse young children, about the reality, about the unimaginable things that a children can acquire. But it is not bad. Actually, studies suggest that reading fantasy books can stimulate their creativity and boost or increase their vocabulary. And also, research indicates that it has best beneficial in students because students or preschoolers that watch or read fantasy stories are not easily confused. We often hear that, young children can tell the difference of fantasy and reality, but the truth is they could they could understand the reality and the fantasy. But there are certain topics or certain stories that they may sometimes be confused then. But in some research, this reading fantasy stories, um, develop their self-regulation skills and their working memory. That's why it is advisable for children as young as 2 to 12 to read such stories like fantasy fiction and imaginative play. Okay, so yes, our topic is modern fantasy, and I will now give the microphone for Miss Ivy May Lopez for the definition of modern fantasy. Thank you so much. Let's see each other later.
So thank you, Miss Catalan, for the introduction. What? So definition of modern fantasy. Next slide. So yan, wait lang. What is modern fantasy? So this is the definition. Modern fantasy is a genre of literature that is closely related to traditional literature. It is distinguished by its story element that violate the natural physical laws of our known world. It consists of elements like talking animals, imaginary world, bizarre characters such as giants, hobbits, magical beings such as witches, genies, and so on. So it is probably the most difficult genre to write. It because an author has to create a new set of physical laws and then conform precisely to them. It is literature is written by known authors that is set either in a make-believe or imaginary world in which places, people, or creatures could not exist or have events that could not possibly happen. Next, tiny slip can destroy the credibility of the story. It must have a strong, credible plot and universal truth found in all well-written books. It should be examined issues of the human condition. So that's all for the definition of modern fantasy. Next slide. So let's go to the cycle format. Next slide. The cycle format, in which one book is linked to another through characters, settings, or both, is especially prevalent in modern fantasy. So, according to Ellman in 1987, state events in fantasy cycle books are often strung out over 3 or 4 volumes. Authors attempt to make each novel self-contained with varying degrees of success, but usually readers need the entire series of full impact. Next slide po. So, how authors view modern fantasy? So, next slide. So, authors of modern fantasy have the challenge of persuading readers to open themselves up to believing that which is contrary to reality, strange, whimsical, or magical, yet has an eternal logic and consistency. Sometimes authors will accomplish this through beginning the story and in a familiar and ordinary settings, which typical contemporary human being as characters. A transition is then made from this realistic world to the fantasy world. Next slide po. So, evaluation and selection of modern fantasy. Next. In this evaluation and selection of modern fantasy, for a modern fantasy to be truly imaginative, the author must be provide a unique settings. So, in some stories, the setting may be moved beyond the realistic in both time, moving to the past or future, or holding time still. And place imagine worlds. So, in other stories, only one of these elements will go beyond reality. Moreover, a modern fantasy author's creation must be original. In recent years, partially due to an upsurge of sects whose numbers refer to themselves as witches, challenges to fantasies for children have increased. So, in selecting and recommending stories with this element, teachers need to be aware of the concern of their student parents with regard to the supernatural as topic in book for children. It suggests that children have one more developed appreciation of the boundary between fantasy and reality. So then, it's often supposed the distinction between fantasy and reality is basic to human cognition, reflecting a fundamental ontological divide between the non-real and the real. Next po. So, I give it I will give a short introduction about types of modern fantasy. So in modern fantasy, as in other genre, the distinction between types are not totally discrete. The types of modern fantasy in the section that follow are the starting point of thinking about the variety of fantastic stories, motifs, themes, and characters the gifted authors have created. Additional categories could be listened and fit appropriately in more than one categories. So that's all for the introduction. So may I call on Miss Alia Bianca to proceed. Thank you.
Ayan, thank you. Thank you so much, Ivy, for introducing me. Of course, as Miss Ivy said, there are many, types of modern fantasy. And as I've already told earlier that some children, they make some errors of judgment then when watching or reading some literary fantasy genre. For example, if nakita nilang hinawakan ng superhero, if they see the superhero touch a fire and they di naman sila nasaktan, they may also try it. But again, there are researches that proves that that there's low percentage lang yung nakakagawa ng ganong errors. So for this part, I will tackle about the modern fantasy. But before I proceed to its definition, or to the types of modern fantasy, I will just yan, modern folk tales. Yun nga, before I proceed, may I know if you still remember what is folk tales? Um, you can unmute your mic if you want to answer. If not, I will call someone else. Do you still remember what is folk tales, guys? Okay, I think no one. Okay, I won't be able to call anyone na lang. I'll just give you a brief meaning about folk tales. Okay, so folk tales or stories, or these are stories that are passed down from generation to generation by word of mouth. It is a term of, oral tradition. So have you ever wondered why till up till this day there is still we still know the story of tortoise and the hare, or Jack and the Beanstalk, or any other folk tales that is, super duper old now. Have you ever wondered of that? Well, um, and one example that I could think of right now is that when a child go to sleep, usually the mom will tell him or her a story. And as the child grows older and eventually had a chance to be a parent, he or she could also tell that specific story, um, a story when he or she have a kid na. So napapasa-pasa siya. That is what I meant for oral tradition. And another example would be a teacher. A teacher is an avid fan or of folk tales. So if the teacher is an avid fan, he or she could also teach her students um the folk tales that the teacher have read. So there are many ways to share or spread the oral tradition. That is why it was said na it could pass through generation. Until the present time, we still know the story and the moral behind it. Okay? But but what is the difference of folk tale and modern folk tale? So modern folk tales are also called literal, okay, literary folktales are tales told in a form of similar to a traditional tale with an accompanying typical elements, little character description, strong conflict, fast-moving plot with a sudden resolution and vague setting. So, in some cases, a folk tale could also have a magical element, and we'll know more about it later. But to add, the author here is known and identifiable who has written the tale in this form. So Beck's example would be the tales of Hans Christian Andersen that is turned into a modern tale. For example, the folk tale that we know is named or entitled Snow Queen. But in this modern time, we know that the Snow Queen is now frozen. You know the movie Frozen, like what you have answered earlier. Frozen is based on the story of Christian Andersen, the Snow Queen. So the folk tale here is the Snow Queen, and the modern folk tale, which is a contemporary forms that the producer used, is in the movie Frozen. Okay? So another example would be the Christian Andersen ulit, the brave teen soldier. And now in the modern time, we watch it as Toy Story. You know the Toy Story where there are a lot of dolls um who brought to life. That is what we call modern folktale. Now, let's see the next slide. So when you see this picture, what comes into your mind? What story is this? Do you have any idea what story or movie is this? You can type it in your comment section. This is plus points. When I'm asking question, there will be always a point. So if you are participative, we will add your point. And I see no one. I will count to 15, and and if there's no one to answer, I will just give the answer directly because we don't want to waste any time. Okay, some answered it. Wait. Yes, that is right, Miss Jana, Miss Melanie, and Miss Kaizen. So you all got a point. Um, this is from the movie Tangled. Okay, so why Tangled? Because the Tangled movie is based on what folktale. Now, another recitation to Um, where did saan binase or where um what movie was Tangled based on? Correct, Ate Davi, Rapunzel. So let's see what is the difference of the folk tale and the modern folk tale. So let's watch a short trailer from Tangled by Danny Fogelman. He is the producer of Tangled. Okay. This is just 2 minutes, so can you hear the sound?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ayan. Did you guys miss the movie? Because I clearly do, no? It's been a long time since I watched this trailer. So I thought that I could use this as an example in our discussion. So now let's differentiate the folktale and the modern folktale. But there is a lingering question in my mind right now. How can we figure out that this is a modern folktale? So when a tale exists a long time ago, like for example, the Rapunzel, then it was newly made to this period of time. It's called the modern folktale. That is how you differentiate the two. But if you will identify clearly, you can see that there's a little character description here, and there are certain changes or alterations that they have made compared to the original. Okay. Um, so the folk tale wasn't known as Tangled talaga, right? It was Rapunzel. So Rapunzel's mother craves for lettuce. At the bang story doon, parang yung mother of Rapunzel, she craves for lettuce because she's pregnant. And then her husband tried to steal some lettuce in a place where the witch resides. Um, and eventually he was caught. So her father promised to do anything, but the witch for the lettuce, the witch wants the carpenter's baby in return. That's why the carpenters um built a tower so that they can protect their baby. But of course, the witch has magic superpowers. They see she sees everything. That's why she could go to the carpenter's baby inside the tower, and from then on, the witch cast a spell on the parents of Rapunzel, and later on, the princess or the Rapunzel was trapped inside the tower. And whenever the witch wants to go outside, she will use Rapunzel's hair to go down. And as the story goes, the Rapunzel met a prince that saved her from the tower. But compared to Tangled has this magical element that they put. Rapunzel's hair in Tangled has a magic power. This magic power helps the witch in this movie, um, she became her mother. Rapunzel, the princess here, Princess Rapunzel here, um, is her hair is magical, and whenever whenever it cut whenever they cut her hair, nababawasan yung powers niya. And pag nababawasan yung powers niya, tumatanda yung witch na kinikilala niyang as her mother. That's why there is a huge significant difference between how the Grimm brothers, the original author of Rapunzel, and Dan Fogelman produced both stories. Okay? So in conclusion, modern folktale increases the reader's consciousness and appreciation towards culture, which have a set of behavior that will help them reinforce their expectation to have a meaningful life. Ito ay nakadepende kung sino ang mapoportray. Like for example, um, the story is made back yung Grimm Brothers Rapunzel, but pwede din gamitin ng mga taga-India yung concept ng Rapunzel. Pero ibang portrayal na. Bakit? Kasi may sinama na silang Indian culture doon. So, pwedeng maiba yon depending on the producer, the director, and the scriptwriter of the story. Okay, let's move on to the animal fantasy. Are you guys still here with me ba? Can you type I love literature if you are still here with me? I want to see who are active and still listening in our discussion. Okay, thank you, Princess. You are now here. Hello. For Melanie, hello. Nicole, hello. Ate Davi, Kaizen, yan. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the next type of fantasy. So next would be the animal fantasy. So animal fantasies are stories in which animals behave as human beings in that they experience certain emotion. So animal fantasies should still retain their animalistic characteristic, even though they can also feel and talk like humans in the story. They still retain their animal integrity. And because the author wants and will interpret the animal for reader with humanistic terms without, they can do that without destroying the animal's integrity. So the interest of animal stories, it peaks at, age 8 or 9. Many children and adults are still enjoying and engaged with such stories. Personally, me, I also read animal fantasy stories. I don't know, I just enjoy it. And best example here would be The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. So I don't know if you know The Tale of Peter Rabbit, but Peter Rabbit, he wears blue suit. He talks then just like humans, but he's very naughty and still eats beetroots and carrots, and still, that's the usual thing that a rabbit would do. They also run with four I with four they use their hands and feet to run. They still, have this animalistic characteristic, but they have emotions. In the story, their mother and his siblings talk with each other. So like just like humans, we are talking, and that would be the example for the animal fantasy. Okay, next. Yan. Next would be the personified toys and objects. So stories in which admired object or beloved toys are brought to life or believed by a child or adult character in the story. So I don't know any one of you here, but I will just share a short story again. So I have with me my longest toy ever that until now I'm still with him. Ayan, nakikita niyo ba siya? Yan, nakikita niyo ba siya? Like, hello guys. Nakikita niyo ba siya? So, etong ano na 'to, di ko binago yung name. Na-retain ko pa rin yung name niya. His name is of course Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. I don't know, when I was a child, I was always sleep beside him, always, as in always. Tapos lagi nakaganyan niya, naka-hug ako lagi sa kanya. And kahit palipat-lipat ako ng bahay, pangatlong lipat ko na ng bahay, kasama ko pa rin siya, pero ibang laruan ko na-dispose ko na, pero siya kasama ko. Nung bata kasi ako, I believe that my objects and toys can speak. Parang they speak each other during at night. Like, okay, mamaya na mag-example, no? Pero I believe that, and I always admired that when I was a kid. Nung bata nga ako, mahilig din ako sa sa imaginary friends. Like I have imaginary friends back at the time, and I always talk with them talaga. Like there is a set of toys and I would talk each and every one of them. And as a child kasi talagang gumagana yung imagination, yung mga imaginary beings sa utak natin. Kaya in literature and in movie, we would often there are certain genres that merong personified toys and object na nabubuhay or they become alive. And these type of genre, kaya feeling, siguro nung bata ako, napanood ko na yung Toy Story nung time na yun siguro. Kaya parang naisip ko na, what if my toys are speaking each other when I if tulog ako. Kaya parang dahil dun sa specific movie na yun yung pumasok sa isip ko. So parang that influenced me the idea na these objects are nabubuhay, or they become alive. So that is why sobrang laking influence ng literature and movies sa atin, especially kapag fantasy, because we begin to imagine things. And best example would be Toy Story. Toy Story, kakatapos ko lang mapanood niyan, ano ata yan, for movies. And I finished all of those in 2 days, like etong week lang. And I find it good naman. Kasi all of the toys talaga are speaking. And in the fourth movie, there was one kid there, yung bida, di naman protagonist pala. Basta yung side character lang din siya. Yung inaalagaan nilang bata, si Bobby, nakagawa siya ng spork, tapos nilagyan niya ng hand, tsaka ng mata. Tapos nabuhay. Eh, di ba yung mga bata mahilig sa ganun? They want to create things on their own, then iisipin nila na nagsasalita ito. So dahil kung napanood ng bata na yon yung Toy Story na movie, baka maisip niya rin na yung sporky na ginawa niya or yung item na ginawa niya na tao ay nagsasalita. That's why there is a really big influence in terms of personified objects. And another thing is the Pinocchio. Pinocchio is made of, I think, wood, because by carpenter yung naggumawa sa kanya. And nabuhay siya, 'di ba? Every time that um he will, tell a lie, humahaba yung ilong niya. So, and the moral of the story here is kapag ang bata nakapanood ng Pinocchio, matatakot siya. Why? Matatakot siya magsinungaling kasi hahaba yung ilong. So, may influence siya. There's so um personified objects do have a really big impact then when a child reads or watch a certain literature and movie. So yes, that would be all for my part. I will now give the microphone to Miss Evangeline Sedo for the unusual characters and strange situation. Thank you so much.
Miss Aliyah, am I loud and clear?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Aliyah. Hi, good day to everyone. I am Evangeline Anseda. And for my part, unusual character and strange situation. Stories that appear to be ridiculous, exaggerated, and beyond reality. Unusual character and strange situations are approach of fantasy through reality but take it beyond reality to be ridiculous or exaggerated. These are the characters somewhat weird and sometimes creepy looking. They have like different and unique feature in terms of their appearance that belong to them and make them unrecognizable, but not just also in their appearance but also to their characteristics, and maybe they have unique powers like they can see the future or can touch fire and can talk to animals. And for strange situations that something strange is happening in the story that is sometimes unexpected to happen, and also that is so different and also unusual and odd in appearance. And for example, next slide. For example, is the Jack and the Beanstalk. Is Jack and the Beanstalk is all about a boy named Jack, a poor country boy, trades the family cow for a handful of magic beans, so which grows into a massive towering beanstalk and reaching up into the clouds. And Jack climbs to the height of leaves, the beanstalk, and finds himself in the castle of unfriendly giants. So the giant senses Jack presence in Christ, and the giants are so big and they also has a human appearance, but somehow is they have a weird looking face and some of the part of their body is different. That is the example of strange situations and the unusual character, because it's fantasy and you can't grow that you can grow high beanstalk that up to the clouds. And that's for the example of strange, unusual character and strange situations. Next slide. Worlds of Little People. Worlds of Little People, stories about the worlds inhabited by miniature people who have developed a culture of their own in this world or who live in another world. Worlds inhabited by these are the characters, or these are the stories that the characters are so little that they have their own livelihood, way of life in this day, showing their life even if they are so little. Like for example is next slide, the Smurf. The Smurfs are very small and they are color blue. In stories which they appear with humans, they are small enough to stand on a human hand. Smurf has a life. They can also sing, dance, and paint. And in the story, it shows there how they survive to animals. The Smurfs are with each other to help those in need. And whether it was one of their own, an animal in the forest, or a human, that bravery sometimes resulted in trouble. But in the end, the Smurf always found the way to safety and never to survive, to never ended up on Gargamel's gold recipe, and the Gargamel's is the antagonist in the story. And next slide. Supernatural events. Supernatural events stories where the main characters have natural abilities or have assistance from natural beings. Supernatural events are evoke the supernatural, such as witches, ghosts, and magic realism. A blend of fantasy and realism has the appearance of a work of realism, but gradually introduces the fantastic as an integral and necessary part of the story. And for my example for the supernatural events is, next slide, is the Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel are brothers and sister. They are abandoned in the forest and where they fall into the hands of a witch who lives in a house of made of gingerbread, cake, candy, and the cannibalistic witch intends to fatten Hansel before eventually eating him. But Gretel pushes the witch in her own oven and kills her. So that's for the example of supernatural events, the Hansel and Gretel. Next slide. Mystery fantasy. Mystery fantasy stories that contain a mystery aspect but can also involve characters from the supernatural world. Um, Mystery fantasy are that involves mystery that needs to solve and focuses on a puzzling crime with a mix of fantasy and mystery. Story appeals to their sense of curiosity. And for example to that is, next slide. For example is the Corpse Bride. Corpse Bride, something unexpected mystery happens to a guy, Victory, the guy, while he is in a forest practicing his line for the wedding. A tree branches a hand that drags him to the land of dead. It belongs to Emily, who was murdered after eloping with her love and wants to marry Victor. Victor don't want to marry to Emily because Emily is dead and Victor is not. And Victor is going to be married to someone else in the world. But still, at the end, Victor and Emily did not end up marrying. Emily let go Victor because she knows that she is the other woman and Victor belongs to the real world. And that's for the example of the mystery fantasy. And thank you for listening. That's for my part. And now, may I call on Miss Pamplona?
Thank you for the informative discussion, Ms. Seda. Now, before we proceed to the last discussion of mine, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Lizelle Pamplona, the last discussant for the types of the modern fantasy, which are historical fantasy, quest stories, science fiction, and science fantasy. And now let's talk about first historical fantasy. So what is historical fantasy? It is a category of fantasy and genre of historical fiction that incorporates fantastic elements such as magic into a more realistic narrative. So it takes a period of history from this world's part and introduces fantasy elements to it, and it consists of stories that are set in the worlds in which the story has diverged from the actual history of the world. So there is much crossover with other subgenres of fantasy. Those classed as Arthurian, Celtic, or Dark Ages could just as easily be placed in historical fantasy. And historical fantasy is fitting on this classification that take place prior to the 20th century. And the films of this genre may have plots set of biblical times and classical antiquity. They often have plots based very loosely or mythology of legends or Greek, Roman history, or the surrounding cultures of the same era. Next slide po. And now let's move to the subgenres of historical fantasy. So there are nine historical subgenres of fantasy. So first we have Arabian fantasy that encompasses epic poetry and epic fantasy of Arabic literature. So virtually all the societies have developed folk tales encompassing tales of heroes, and these are legends, many based on the real events and historical figures. So the second one is Celtic fantasy. It has links to a historical fantasy and Celtic historical fiction. So third is classical fantasy. It is a subgenre fantasy based on the Greek and Roman myths. So for the symbolism of the classical mythology is enormously influential on Western culture, but it was not until the 19th century that it was used in the context of literary fantasy. So the fourth one is fantasy of manners, or also known as manner punk. It is a subgenre that takes place within a strict, elaborate, and hierarchical social structure. So in the fifth one is fantasy steampunk. So it is a another subgenre of historical fantasy that's set the Victorian or Edwardian era. So this will be talk, talking about the steam technology mixed with Victorian or Gothic style architecture and technology. So one of the sub or the context of fantasy steampunk is gaslamp fantasy. It is a genre of both steampunk and historical fantasy that takes place in an alternative universe based on Victorian and Edwardian eras. So the magic plays a more important role than the era's mechanical technology. So the sixth one is gunpowder fantasy. It combines the elements of epic fantasy such as magic, mythical creatures, elves, or epic scale, and with rifles and railroads. So it is generally set in a world with roughly equivalent technology of the 17th to the two 19th centuries, and particularly the latter eras. So the seventh is medieval fantasy. It is common among role-playing games and high fantasy literature that works in the aspect of medieval history, such as legends from the Middle Ages, and aesthetics such as medievalism's overlap with fantasy. The second to the last is prehistoric fantasy. That these are the stories that set in prehistoric times and depicting the lives of prehistoric people. And the last would be wuxia. It is literally meaning martial arts or the heroes, that is subgenre of quasi-fantasy and martial arts genre in literature, television, and cinema. It features prominently in the popular culture of Chinese-speaking areas, and the most important writers have devoted followings. So, next slide po. So the next types of modern fantasy is quest stories. So a quest is a journey toward a specific mission or a goal. The word serves a plot device in mythology and fiction. It is a difficult journey towards a goal, often symbolic or allegorical. It is a tales of quest feature prominent in the folklore of every nation and ethnic culture. So the form of a quest narrative is simple. Basically, the author describes his or her desire to do something, see something, experience something, or discover something. So a quest story takes the main character away from home and sends them on a journey searching for something. This type of story usually has a group of main characters that take on the quest together. So quest story is an adventurous journey undergone by the main character or the protagonist of a story. So the protagonist usually meets with and overcome a series of obstacles, returning in the end with the benefits of knowledge and experience from his quest. There are several elements of quest in storytelling. So next slide po. So according to Thomas C. Foster, it tells that all great narratives take us on a quest. So there are five elements of a quest stories, and these are the quester, a place to go, the stated reason to go, challenges and trials along the way, and the real reason to go. So first, the quester, it is the first things you need to decide who to feature as the quester of your presentation. If it's you, you'll be telling your story or explaining the relationship of the presentation. So it might be also be the audience. So as a presenter, you want the audience to place themselves in your presentation. So it is important that you help them understand how your presentation intersects with the journey. So a place to go, it refers to a great narrative or speech as being moving. So this alludes to the fact that if the speaker has done her job, the listener should be somewhere different at the end of the presentation. So it's important that you know that you were where the place is by having clearly defined presentation of the objective. The third, the stated reason to go, it is the element of the quest that most obvious reason that you're giving in the presentation. So it it may be called the main purpose or a goal that you want to accomplish. So usually messages fall under the category of these general purposes of speaking, such as to inform, to persuade, or to entertain. So the fourth one is challenges and trials along the way. The audience or the members know that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So you have to be upfront about the challenges of the quest in your presentation content. And the last element is the real reason to go. It is the connected to the last element, which is the real reason to go that would answer the WH questions such as what, when, why, and where, and how. So the purpose of Quest Story, please next slide po. So the purpose of Quest Story is it is a quest that narrative is simple, like what I've said earlier. So it gives a structure and suspense to a piece that might otherwise to be a flat and static. So the author describe his or her desire to do something, see something, and experience and discover. So the goal of the quest story is to encourage a sense of seeking, questioning, and curiosity, propelling to the readers forward into the narrative. So there are examples of quest stories. Next slide po. So the first one is The Lord of the Rings. So it tackles earlier in the activity. So it is an epic high fantasy novel by the English author and the scholar J.R.R. Tolkien that's set in the Middle Earth, intended to be the Earth at some time in the distant past. So the story began as a sequel of Tolkien's 1937 children's book, The Hobbit, but it eventually developed into a much larger work. So the Lord of the Rings, it is a saga of a group that sometimes reluctant heroes who set forth to save their world from consummate evil. Its many worlds and creatures were drawn from Tolkien's extensive knowledge of philology and folklore. So the genre of the Lord of the Rings are high fantasy and adventure. So the next one is The Hobbit. It is a series of three high fantasy adventure films directed by Peter Jackson. So The Hobbit, it is directed by Peter Jackson, and there are subtitles: Unexpected Journey, The Desolation of Smaug, and The Battle of the Five Armies. So this film are based on the 1937 novel The Hobbit by J.R.R. So the Hobbit is Tolkien's fictional universe and follows the quest of home-loving Bilbo Baggins, the titular hobbit, to win a share of the treasure guarded by a dragon named Smaug. So the Bilbo's journey takes him from his light-hearted rural surroundings into a more sinister territory. So the Hobbit series was released a decade after the Lord of the Rings trilogy but served as its prequel within the story chronology. So the trilogy tells a continuous story set in the Middle Earth 60 years before the Lord of the Rings. So the last types would be science fiction and science fantasy. Next slide po. So first is science fiction. Can I ask a question? So what do you think is the difference of science fiction and science fantasy? You can unmute po your mic if you want to answer. If no one po, I would call Miss Flores. Can you answer po? So if none, so the difference of science fiction and science fantasy is the story includes a mix possible of science fiction, scientifically possible future or alternate events or technology, and something that is impossible, then it is a science fantasy. So fiction explores what is possible but not true, while the fantasy explores what is impossible. So first, let's discuss what is science fiction. So science fiction can trace its roots back to ancient mythology and is related to fantasy, horror, and superhero fiction and contains many subgenres. It was first used in 1851, but it wasn't until 1929. The definition has long been disputed among authors, critics, scholars, and readers. So science fiction is a genre of speculative fiction which typically deals with an imaginative and futuristic concepts such as advanced science and technology, space exploration, time travel, parallel universe, extraterrestrial life, sentient artificial intelligence, cybernetics, certain forms of immorality like mind uploading and the singularity. So science fiction predicted several existing inventions such as atomic bomb, robots, and Verizon, whose names entirely match their fictional predecessors. So there are types of science fictions, which are hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi. So next slide po. So science fiction is a part of the larger umbrella of speculative fiction. It contains several genres that are futuristic, fantastical, or supernatural plot elements. So basically, any image components that don't exist in the context of the everyday world. Other types of speculative fiction includes fantasy, horror, paranormal, and apocalyptic literature. So first is hard sci-fi or hard science fiction. It is based on scientific accuracy and known facts and logic. So it deals with sciences such as math, physics, computer science, engineering, and chemistry. And soft science fiction or soft sci-fi, it places greater emphasis on the human aspects of the story that integrating science of human behavior such as like psychology, sociology, history, economics, and politics. So the purpose of the science fiction is, next slide po, Next slide po. So the purpose is to explore the possible and speculate about the unknown, and given its imaginative nature, science fiction inspires readers to envision a more advanced, innovative, and adventurous future. So the next and the last type of modern fantasy is science fantasy. So science fantasy is a genre where books may include both science fiction and fantasy elements. So it is a hybrid genre with speculative fiction that simultaneously draws upon or combines tropes and elements from both science fiction and fantasy. It differs from hard science fiction because science fantasy is slightly different from soft sci-fi, but the line between them is blurred and they can be often considered the same thing. So, conventional science fiction story that is presented scientific logical, while a conventional fantasy story contains mostly supernatural and artistic elements that disregard the scientific laws of the real world. So, in the world of science fantasy, it laid out the scientifically logical and often supplied with hard science-like explanation of any supernatural elements. So, there are so the next slide would be the example. So, next slide po. So, first is Star Wars. So, Star Wars is a example of science fiction. And the Harry Potter is example of science fantasy. So first, Star Wars, it is an American epic space opera multimedia franchise created by George Lucas, which began with the eponymous 1977 film and quickly became a worldwide pop culture phenomenon. It's a fairy tale type story, but it takes place in space. It has futuristic technology and alien species, but it does not include accurate or realistic science. So this makes it fantasy rather than the science fiction. Star Wars might be space fantasy or space opera, but its setting is still a science fiction setting. So Star Wars has science fictional devices and technology that allows the story to take place. And Harry Potter, it is a series of 7 fantasy novels written by British author J.K. Rowling. The novels chronicle the lives of a young wizard, Harry Potter, and his friends Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley, all of whom are students at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And familiar naman po kayo kung ano yung Harry Potter and Star Wars. So, it is interesting to note that author Philip Nell has classified the Harry Potter book series as an epic fantasy for this season. By featuring more than 100 characters, the Harry Potter series is an epic fantasy. So, next slide po. So, take note that science fiction and fantasy do not need to provide a mirror image of reality in order to offer compelling stories about serious social and political issues. So, reading science fiction and fantasy can help the readers to make sense of the world rather than limiting the reader's capacity to deal with the reality, and exposure to the outside the box creative stories and may expand their ability to engage reality based on science. So, to sum it up, modern fantasy has story elements that violate the natural physical laws or unknown world events such as the magic. So, historical fantasy, quest stories, science fiction, and science fantasy are the ones under of modern fantasy that depicts on how we would be able to believe or not the type of modern fantasy and literature. So these genres help us to distinguish the differences of understand the movie, books, or anything that we can learn in the identifying the classification of a modern fantasy. So fantasy is a genre that has much to offer young readers, and one of the most compelling reasons for giving children fantasy is that it comments on social reality through indirections such as metaphor, allegory, parable, and can therefore deal with complex moral questions in a more playful and exaggerated manner. and Miss Catalan for the questions. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I hope that you are still awake because I will be asking more questions for additional recitation points. Okay, so ano na to, one person every question so that we will finish this as quickly as possible. Okay, next. Question number one. What type of modern fantasy do you usually read or watch? You can unmute your mic or you can just type it in the comment section. Okay. Hello? Can you answer this question, please? What type of modern fantasy do you usually read or watch? None? Hello? This is additional points, ha? Okay, I will be calling na lang. May I call on Miss Melanie for the number one question? Melanie, are you there? Miss Melanie? Okay, I think wala. Miss Jana. Oh, wait. I will. I am Miss Jana. Can you answer the question, please? Oh, wait. Someone answered it na pala. It said here from Miss Nicole Flores, I used to love Lord of the Rings actually, simply because I'm into adventure genre before. Yes, no, actually, hindi ko pa napapanood yung Lord of the Rings, but I want to watch The Hobbit. And I started yesterday na. Medyo kalahati ko na yung movie. So, yeah, it's fun to watch adventure genre talaga. Thank you for sharing your insight, Miss Nicole. So, next question. If you're going to be a writer, what type of modern fantasy will you use? May I please hear an answer from Miss Davi for question number two? You can
Hello.
unmute your microphone. Hello po. Yes.
I think I will write a animal fantasy as we have a project in um another subject from third year wherein we are required to write a short story for children. So if I will be a writer, I wanna try to write animal fantasy as I think it is very it is very challenging to think something about animals that about human that you can apply in animals. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ate Davi. That was a great answer, by the way. So, alam nyo na, sa third year, we will need to create a short story for children. But thank you, Ate Davi, for that. No, at least we have an idea when we go to third year. Yes. Thank you. So next question, three. How can you apply this lesson for your future teaching and studying literature? May I call on Miss Kaizen Cardino for this third question?
Yes, learning about the modern uh ano nga yung modern fantasy. Yes.
Yes, modern
Learning
fantasy.
about modern fantasy allow me to apply it in the future, wherein I am able to know I am able to know the different types in which I can share it to my future students by also using examples that would allow them to understand well what is modern fantasy is, what is the types of the modern fantasy is, and yes, that's all.
Yes, thank you, Miss Kaizen. That was actually correct because I also do believe that what you have said, no, na if I were to be a future teacher one day, since it's literature, I will try to encourage them by using those type of fantasy, because those type of fantasies may pave a way for them to get interested with the certain topics that they want. Like they have the freedom to choose what option to choose or what type of modern fantasy that they could choose. So I may use this in the future as well. So thank you so much, Miss Kaizen. Let's move on to question number 4. How will you tell your student the difference of fantasy and reality? May I call on Mr. Charles Gohar for the question number 4? Since I think that wala pa siyang point. Yes.
Hello.
Mr. Gohar,
Hello. Am I
hello?
audible?
It's kind of, mahina.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
So I think I'm going to differentiate fantasy and reality to my students through, let's say for fantasy, this is where our imagination lies, right? Everything in fantasy can happen. Everything is possible. Unlike in reality, even though we have these expectations in life, even though we have these dreams or goals, sometimes we cannot really achieve it in reality. There are circumstances that we need to consider for us to be able to have those kind of things. Unlike in fantasy, we can really like, if you want to be a pilot, you can be in fantasy. I think that's I can differentiate the two through the words impossible and possible. That's all.
Okay, thank you so much, Charles. No, because you differentiated it both organizedly. Because I made this question because if a student will come up to us in the future and they will ask us, um, kasi 'di ba usually children are very their curiosity talaga is sobrang lawak. They're wide na kung ano yung pwede nilang magawa in fantasy. And some some students they tend to not believe the reality because they are so um isolated by the fantasy na binibigay nung tao na sa paligid niya. That is why when a student comes up to you and asks what is the difference of fantasy and reality, we should also be aware of how to answer that. Because as students of English, English majors pa naman pa naman tayo, sorry. Um we should be able to help them distinguish the difference of fantasy and reality. Because in that way, hindi sila magiging ignorante. When they grow old, um, they would, experience the fun, the joyous experiences of being in a fantasy world. And we should also teach them how to be prepared in the reality as they grow old, because as they grow older, sometimes yung fantasy natin or yung mga imaginable impossible things na pwede nating magawa is hindi natin masyado naiisip because we're adults na. That's why we should stimulate their feelings and emotions and moral when we tell the difference between fantasy and reality. Okay, next is for the question number 5. Um, I think, is Miss Gloris still here or Miss Melanie? I think Miss Gloris na lang for question number 5. What have you learned in today's discussion? Yes, can you answer that, please? Thank you. Miss Flores? Miss Flores or Miss Melanie, are you still here? Okay, if none, I will just call Miss Jana. You can unmute your microphone, Miss Jana, for number 5th question.
Hello,
Thank
can
you.
you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So what I've learned in today's discussion is about the modern fantasy, wherein you discuss about the difference between the story of the reality and the story in in children's imaginations. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, so to sum it all up, our discussion, we talked about the types of modern fantasy, the quest stories, modern folk tales, animal fantasy, and such, science fiction, little worlds. Um, I really hope that you've learned something, especially the evaluation and selection of modern fantasy that is really vital in this discussion because it is in our syllabus that we must know how to evaluate and select what literature should be tackled about. And of course, let's just be prepared in the future to prepare to answer questions from our future students because um they really have certain curiosity that we have to we have to satisfy their curiosity because that's our role as teachers to disseminate information to them, to help them understand, or to let them engage in such literature. And thank you for listening, everyone. I hope that you learned something new um because I we enjoy reporting or discussing this to you. And yes, that would be all. All of your recitations are all recorded, so don't worry about it. So thank you so much and have a good day. Thank you.